Fantastic. Well then, arrivederci and ciao, good lords and ladies, and good noble friends in between. I am Antonio de Sforza, and we are going to be going over making magic in multiple medievalisms. Let me pop this up so that way we can go over that together. I'm someone who is really more open to having a conversation than just a straight lecture. So if ever you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask them. I'm going to be asking for questions multiple points throughout the presentation and having a Q&A at the end. And I'm interested to getting your guys' opinions on things and getting your guys' input as much as sharing my own. And so the subtitle for this class is How the Tools of Improvisational Street Theater Create Success for both Rennies and SCAdians. Our mission statement is, from the earliest beginnings, the Society of Creative Anachronism offers its members an opportunity to protest the modern life by delving headfirst into the ways and means of times gone by. Through researching personas, fashioning garb, and partaking in a wide range of period pursuits, SCAdians embrace their period of study through a particular lens, all while asserting how distinct they are from another type of group with essentially similar aims. By combining an in-depth look at the history of each of these types of pursuits with a crash course in improvisational street theater, this class will highlight how the skills of one will highlight how the skills one learns in a society or in the Renaissance Festival can be used to thrive as a performer in both. And our thesis is, over the past several decades, a wide-scale passion for bringing the past to life has emerged across North America and the wider world at large. In pursuit of this passion, multiple organizations have arisen to produce immersive experiences for participants and audiences alike. Whether a full-time profession or a casual hobby, a solid understanding of the similarities and differences between these pursuits will enrich the medievalist in a wide array of practical skills in the realms of period research, persona development, and performance art. And now we're going to be jumping a little bit into some context. First, we're going to be looking at medievalism. This is going to be the overarching umbrella term. In Merriam-Webster, as basic as it gets, it's the devotion to the institution, arts, and practices of the Middle Ages. Essentially, it can be said as, if you have a passion for anything in the Middle Ages, or a passion for anything that one would consider quote-unquote medieval, whether it is an academic passion or a hands-on passion, you fall into the wider category of medievalism. And in recent years, with the society expanding beyond its medieval and Renaissance roots to cover all of world history before about the year 1600, it has expanded well beyond this traditional definition of. With the society really expanding to cover a lot of world history outside of pure medievalism, this definition, it only now fits a certain select group within the society. However, because that group has always been at the core and it's always been at the center of the mission statement, the organization as a whole is still seen as one that falls under the medievalism umbrella, even though nowadays they celebrate a lot of a wider spectrum of history in a very similar way. And there are two major elements that I want to talk to you about within the umbrella of medievalism. First is going to be the Renaissance Festival. And now most of you are familiar with what a Renaissance Festival is. It is a theatrical performance that allows a paying audience to immerse themselves in either a Middle Ages or a Renaissance setting, typically a country fair with the monarch visiting. However, that particular That particular premise can vary, and the whole thing began in 1963 with the founding of the Renaissance Pleasure Fair in Southern California, nowadays known as the original Renaissance Fair. It's all really stemmed as an educational arts project on the part of Phyllis Patterson, who was again trying to create a typical spring celebration in an English rural village, which was the original and still the most prominent premise for a Ren Fair. And it brings together folk pageants, jousting, storytellers, minstrels, dance and theater performers, traditional folk games, fortune tellers, craftsmen, and the whole gambit to really create an immersive experience for everyone. That particular show evolved a little bit away from its educational roots and grew into something that is now as much about frolicking and fun as it is about learning and the hardcore history. And with that, we have seen break off events and rival companies establishing their own fairs all around the country, with a few dozen distinct fairs happening across the United States today, with time periods ranging from the days of Robin Hood, so early 1200s, very late 1100s, to 1603 and the death of Elizabeth, as well as multiple fantasy-based things where it is a medieval world, yet dragons and elves and fairies and all of that are as prominent as the historical elements. And then we have the Society for Creative Anachronism. This organization was founded on May 1st, 1966, with a grand tournament held in Berkeley, California, with the aim of protesting the 20th century. And from Kapora and from the founding documents, the SCA is an inclusive community pursuing research and recreation of pre-17th century skills, arts, combat, and culture. Lives of participants are enriched as we gain knowledge of history through activities, demonstrations, and events. And that's the short and sweet description that we as the SCAdians give the world about who we are and what we do. And just for size reference, while Ren Fairs are normally a North American thing specifically, we have chapters throughout the US, Canada, but also all throughout Europe, all throughout Australia and New Zealand, as well as parts of the Middle East, East Asia, and South Africa. So we as a society are a truly global experience. And do you have any questions at this point now that we kind of defined a few of the key playing pieces that we're working with today? No? Alrighty then. Now we're going to jump a little bit into a compare and contrast of the two. The Renaissance festivals are, and first primary objective, Ren Fairs, it's provide entertaining and immersion theatrical experiences for the festival patrons. For us in the society, it's to authentically recreate the elements of pre-17th century life. There's where we find our first major difference. Nowadays, since the festivals have emerged into a pure, more for-profit model, as we're going to see in the corporate status point, they're there to make money. And so they have to kind of bend certain elements of what they do in order to be more on the entertainment side and more on the make a quick buck side of things, whereas we in the society, as a nonprofit, would be a lot more hesitant to ever do. And kind of following up on that, each Renaissance Festival is operated as a privately owned for-profit business, whereas we in the society are a 501c3 education not-for-profit organization based out in Mittells, California, with global affiliates in multiple countries around the world. And now that we got that part out of the way, we jump into setting, which is in the Renaissance Festival, they are focused around one very specific time and place with allowed deviations for things when appropriate, i.e. themed weekends. Typically, a Ren Fair will be later in periods, so 15 or 1600s. The monarchs are coming to a very particular area that they don't normally visit, and so there's great fanfare and there's a market. You'll, within that context, you will see things like Vikings and Celts and
Fairies.
stuff like in fairies to an occasion, but we're going to jump to that in a sec. And as well as a few early things here and there, but also on themed weekends, we're going to see things like pirates, space people, Doctor Who. We at the fair that I normally perform at, we have at least one weekend a year where we have a Star Wars costuming group guest casting with us and a TARDIS as like a photo op next to the entrance. And we do all kinds of like fun types of things that you can bend it, although there's one unifying time and place. Within the society, we're completely the opposite. We are anything from 1600 to the beginning of recorded history. If you can research it, you can create it. And within our known world, which is both a fictional and a not so fictional place because we bring it to life, we have about 20 kingdoms and a bunch of principalities and baronies and a world of our own that a lot of that is populated by personas that are not necessarily from that world. That is one of the truly interesting things that as a performing artist and as a creative we're able to really explore in terms of the work that we create on the artistic side. And now we really get into who each of these events are truly for. On the festival side, you have your participants who are your employees, your contractors, your volunteers. They're the people who make the show run. However, they're not the end all be all of who is experiencing the thing. They're what the people that are creating the experience, but they're not experiencing it. In the society, that's completely the reverse because everyone who is there is a participant. They are all collectively creating the magic with the one real qualification for entry being some attempt at pre-17th century clothing. By that particular requirement, you and the fact that everyone is paying their dues to get in and to experience the event, there's no dichotomy between audience who has to be catered to and festival employee who is creating the experience. In the society, it's all blended and it is all one. And that really just bleeds right into here, where in the fair world, the experience is for a paying audience. Depending on the size and scale of the fair, it might be a couple hundred people over the course of the year. At the larger ones, such as the one that I work at, the Arizona Renaissance Festival, we get over 10,000 people a day and over 2,000 people per year, with those numbers typically being reported by the show's producer at the beginning of each subsequent festival day for the day before. So that's how we get the numbers for that. And then for the society, audiences don't really exist. Yes, you have an audience if you're a performing artist and you're doing a specific show, but being in the society, everyone's in costume, everyone's creating the magic together, and we're all equally members of this shared world. There is nobody who is more in the world than anyone else. It don't matter if you're the crown who's been crowned a dozen times, or this is the first time you've even seen it and you threw on a Halloween costume and paid your dues to come in. Everyone is equally part of the world. And then, as we were kind of mentioning before with fairies, Ren fairs are typically really based in history, while most on the larger scale and most of the multi-weekend professional fairs do regularly incorporate a lot of fantasy elements, such as fairies, mermaids, and dragons. They're not as prevalent in most fairs as they are in a handful. In the handful where those are the predominant factors of the setting, we call those quote unquote fantasy fairs. And they are their own type of entity, but they're just as awesome as regular fairs. However, you would be hard pressed to find any kind of Ren fair that doesn't have a wandering fairy or a wandering dragon or a giant mermaid tank where they're doing all the underwater tricks, and then you have somebody next, have like one of them sitting on a rock that you do photo ops with, and you have all the other cast people like wrangling other people into line up. And I could tell you a lot of stories about that experience, but that's it for another time. And I digress. Into the society, while we don't outright reject using fantastical elements, we in the SCA pride ourselves on our collective skills in historical authenticity and the fostering of a culture that promotes historical authenticity among the people who participate with us. We are somebody who, while we understand that things like fairies, mermaids, and dragons are things that bring people into a passion for history, once they're here and once they have their foot in the door, we're people who are going to say, hey, you're awesome, that stuff's cool, this stuff's cool, let's bring you into what we're doing and then get you as historically authentic as you want to be. And now that I've done that level of comparison, does anyone have any questions at all or any perspectives that they want to share? Any at all? Alrighty. I hear somebody typing, but if no one has anything, then wow, it just wants to keep moving over. Well, that's a sign. Alrighty then. In that case, we're going to be delving into the various crossover skills. The first one that, as a Ren Fair performer, you learn very well that helps you as a SCAdian and vice versa is period research. And by period research, I'm talking about the broader and the more far-reaching questions about the time and place in which a person's persona would be focusing their study in or focusing where they live in. And this is the general information like who would be king, who's ruling, and all that kind of stuff. And this would be something that any modern enthusiast of the period would have some familiarity with, and anyone living in the period would be able to tell you off the top of their head if they have what we would consider a complete education. And so some questions you would want to ask is, what time and place specifically are you looking at? What major historical events took place during this time? What is the overall culture like? Is it more artistic and expressive? Is it more militaristic? Is it more just trying to survive the day? What is that culture like? More broadly, what are the arts and the architecture and the performing arts of the time like? Who are the political elite? Is it a monarchy? Is it a diarchy? Is it rule by council, democracy? And who exactly would be on the throne in the years you're looking at? What are the major economic drivers? Are you guys an agrarian society where everyone is needed to till the field? Are you guys a major trading partner like Venice and you're sailing to all the other places in the world and conducting business and making your little town rich? Are you something in between, or are you a major manufacturing plant? What are the major pastimes? What do people like to do when they do have some free time or they do have a holiday and are completely away from their work? How do people occupy themselves and have fun? What is the food like? That one has always been a particular fascination of mine and one of the things that got me into medieval recreation in the first place. because I'm a foodie and I love all kinds of delicious yummies. And where and how does a typical person in that time and place live? And this is, do most people live in huts, in log cabins, in stone palaces? I doubt it, but it's not impossible. And what exactly does their general day look like? Do they get up at the crack of dawn and have to work? Do they all leisurely just relax and do what they do whenever? Or something in between? And the next really big skill, which is a continuation of period research, is persona development. And this consists of the more intimate information which is most directly relevant to the character one is playing. And it revolves around things that the character would know about themselves and and that the people who are around them would know. And there's a really big point that I want to make here in that we have a very wide spectrum of leeway, and this is where creativity can really shine. If you're playing somebody like, say, Richard the Lionheart or Queen Elizabeth I, then you have a lot less give on what you can do because everyone knows who those characters are. Everyone has an opinion of what those characters should be. And if you're portraying one of them, then you have a lot of expectations and essentially baggage to live up to. If you're playing, for example, a 16th century Italian merchant, then with something that particularly broad, you're able to create a unique personage in that. You're able to create a identity for yourself, whether that's just you put completely transplanted into a different time and place, or somebody with a completely separate personality to yourself with completely different interests. You're able to build that and create that in ways that everyone will find as unique and will be more thumbs uppy about. In this particular side of things, a couple of questions you want to ask yourself are, who are you in the world? Where and when specifically were you born? What is your current status in life? And were there any really radical changes within that at any point in life? What exactly does your character do for a living? Are they a soldier, a farmer, a merchant, a wandering troubadour? What does your character's special skills? And this may or may not have anything to do with what they do for a living. In the Ren Fair, one of our classic tropes is somebody has worked their way up to being a master blacksmith, yet they can barely swing a hammer on a piece of metal and are amazing painters and can juggle and sing pretty well. These kinds of things are things you might not necessarily think about, but can be completely unrelated to what your character's specific job is. And the more divergent you can make them, the more original and the more compelling a persona you're able to make. Additionally, who are your character's family and friends? Your rivals, enemies? And this question is something that we can dual layer because, as I mentioned before, in the society, we are creating a known world of 20 kingdoms populated by people who all come, for the most part, from the real world in some time and place. Because of that, you can have family and friends back home, family and friends in your home kingdom, family and friends and or potential enemies in the kingdom your kingdom always goes to war with. And you're able to build that web of connections. And the more you're able to do that, the more truly lived in your character will seem, and the more real it'll seem to people. In the fair world, we're actively required to build a web of at least 10 to 15 people on cast who we can say that our characters are either business associates, friends, or some degree of distant family to, just so that way everyone has an interconnected web and can say, oh, I have a pre-existing relationship with so-and-so. That allows me to then build bits off of and have things to talk about with them on stage and or wandering the lanes. And then finally, what does your character think about the current people in power in their area? And this one is something that allows them to be open to all kinds of different things and all different kinds of political points. And in the SCA, the big thing I can say with this one is, do you want to enter Crown, or do you want to serve as a champion, or do you want to actively serve either your barony or your principality or your kingdom? Why and why not? And allow you to progress from there. And from here on out, we're going to be using a lot of pictures from our cast photographer at the Arizona Renaissance Festival. His brand is Furball Photos, and the links to his website will actually be at the end in the image works cited at the end of the presentation. But now we're going to be jumping into the performance art specific skills. And this is really how working with a scripted piece can be effective. And much like a traditional piece of theater, a scripted show in either the Ren Fair world or the SCA world will feature dialogue, plot lines, costumes, and characters that are all predetermined and rehearsed with a traditional script. In the fair world, it's going to be really the domain of your traveling professionals and specialty groups. In the SCA world, it's going to be more your specialized performing guilds that are going to be doing a lot of these. However, those are going to be a lot more accessible to the prospective new performer, and can be taking the form of your narrative-based play, your musical concert, or the demonstration of specialty skills, kind of like what we're seeing here with the fire eating and the Naughty Nauticals doing their slightly more mature version of their fire trick. And it is a very fun show. If you're ever down here, definitely check these guys out. And so if you're ever preparing a scripted show for a SCAdian performance, here are a couple of major questions you need to be asking your script. Who is your character, and what are their motivations? Who are you sharing the scene with, and what are their motivations? These are important because they tell you why your character is doing what they're doing in the first place and what they want. Because everyone is doing something because they want to get to something. That is true in the society, in the fair world, or in life in general. And so you gotta know what you want, and you gotta know what other people want. Next, how and where in the script and where in the performance piece you're putting on can you find the most emotionally compelling element? Because that is going to be the thing that really connects your audience to what you're doing and really sets your performance apart. Also, how do the events of the scene that you're presenting right now affect the overall trajectory of the narrative? This is majorly important for multi-day performances and multi-piece performances where you have different scenes being performed across the day at different times that really piece together a story when you watch them all, but might not necessarily do so effectively if you don't see all the pieces. In the Ren Fair, this is often a thing. In the society, it's not as much. However, if you're doing, say, building a theatrical crown tournament presentation or coronation presentation because you're helping their majesties with the transition, and you're doing some big epic theatrical piece with the outgoing crown, and then you have the pause with the empty thrones, and then you bring the people in for the new coronation of the new people, and working a lot of your plot points in with that incoming part to make sure it properly connects the outgoing parts. That way you have an effective performance overall. And then most importantly, the one really big question that you want to ask is, how do you engage the audience in what you're doing? It goes back to what I was talking about with the most emotionally compelling parts. But no matter what, if you're a performer, you need to engage. You need to make sure that your audience cares about what you're doing. Otherwise, they're going to detach, and in either a SCAdian setting or a fair setting, much more so than a traditional performance outside of either context, they're free to get up and leave, and they are going to. So you really got to connect with them in order for them to see your show from end to end. And now that we've got the scripted stuff done, we're going to be jumping into the realm of improvisation, which, from the Encyclopedia Britannica, it's the playing of dramatic scenes without written dialogue and with minimal or no predetermined dramatic activity. In our contexts, the no predetermined is a bit of a misnomer because we do have the basic framework in the fair world of who our characters are and why we're all there. In the SCAdian world, we have who our personas are, where the event is, and essentially why we are the traveling bard doing whatever we're doing. But in the context of Ren fairs, these kinds of improvisational theater consist of short interactions between the performance and audience members, and they have three major goals. In a sentence or two, it's tell a complete story, be as over the top and zany as possible, and most importantly, leave the audience feeling good afterwards. Even if you have to make yourself the butt of a joke, you are there to make the audience feel good. If you do that, you won. And a couple of questions and a couple of framework questions that you want to ask are, who am I and who am I talking to? What is the overall context behind our meeting? Both of these kinds of things are things that you will almost certainly have as you're entering your day. How can I make this interaction larger than life? When you see someone, this is your first thing that should be going through your head, is how, with the character that I have, can I do something that will make it seem that we are having a larger than life conversation. For the majority of characters, it's how can I make this person laugh as your immediate follow-up question. And then from there, you're going to have your conversation, you're going to do your funny bits, and then because there's a million other things to do, that person's going to haha, and then haha, yes, thank you, you're awesome, and go on to the next thing. And at that point, you need to ask yourself, what will this person take away from the encounter, or what have they taken away? And in order to do all of that, a few go-to questions that we're always taught at fair are, fine day today, my lord, whenever you need something to start a conversation. Slain a good dragon's day lately, to anyone who has a weapon on their hip or dressed in any kind of body armor. And in the fair world, even if they're not in cast, they will be wearing one of these two elements about 60% of the time. How is it on your side of the kingdom? A question that is broad and vague and allows the person to really respond based on how they're feeling and what they see in front of them based on how you present yourself. Have you seen the Queen today? This is a major element because most people in either the fair world or the SCAdian world are going to be wanting to see the monarchy because that is usually a critical focal point. In the fair world, that being a focal point is baked into the premise. In some events in SCAdia, that's a thing, not in all, but in the majority of events, you have some royal presence there, and you adapt this question to that. And then the next question being, That ring is marvelous. Where did you acquire it? This one is where you're an over-the-top fan of either their ring, their hat, their whatever. Because in the Ren Fair world in particular, but also in the SCAdian world, the people that you're talking to are going to be openly expressive. In in the fair world, you'll see people coming in full costume, for, ranging from spacemen to furries to perfect period pieces. And you just pick something out about what they're wearing and about how they're presenting, compliment it, and start a conversation about it. And then, especially for the little ones, because we have a knighting ceremony for the little ones, and we always see them coming in the Halloween night costumes, at least about a dozen a day. You will always find either a boy or girl who's dressed as a gallant knight, and you say, "Good luck in the tournament today, young knight." And they always squeal with joy, they always get a kick out of it, and it is always appreciated. And then in the SCAdian world, you find a equivalent compliment for the young ones there, because that will help create a magical moment for them. And if you're able to do that, then you build a fan of the organization for life. And with that, we've come towards the end of the presentation. This is a few of the sources that I've been using for research on the text-based side of everything today. And here is a collection of where I've acquired all the images I've used today. And now that we've gone through all of that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And does anyone have any questions at all?
No questions here, but I will say I've been doing Ren Fair for about 20 years now, either as a patron or a booth attendee, and I've been in SCAdian for about 2 years. And I will say I think you covered it pretty well with all of this.
Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate the compliment. And if there are no questions, then I will wish you all a fond farewell. And I thank you so very much for allowing me to spend some time with you guys today. And it's been wonderful being able to really bridge the gap, because I'm somebody who's been doing fair for the past few years. I'm a relatively new player in the SCA, and coming into both, I've heard mixed things about the other. And so I wanted to really dive in and really look at both organizations and what they do. And in doing so, I found that there's a lot of overlap and a lot of awesomeness that we don't really get unless we really see both. And so I wanted to package that all and present that to you all. So thank you so much for the opportunity.